New birth, it's time to rest, refresh, and refocus. It's Sabbatical Rewind.
Our sovereign Savior, after creating the universe in 6 days, decided he needed to rest. I want to know how, as mere mortals, we don't practice better self-care. After 17 weeks of tirelessly producing top-notch ministry here at New Birth, I imposed a sabbatical on our entire staff. As a consequence, we're shut down, but I wanted to provide you with our Rewind Revival every day at 12:30 and at night, where you'll get Snapchats of what I've done in interviews and lectures and sermons that I hope will keep you going. Because even while we're rewinding backwards, I want you to always push forward. Do me a favor, tag somebody, text somebody, tell somebody. I don't feel no ways tired. Come too far from where I started from. Stay tuned. I promise you, you're going to be blessed.
All right. Since we are pressed for time, brother, we are going to get right into it.
All right.
Pastor, how are you, man?
I'm here.
You're here.
This Atlanta traffic is real.
It's real.
Yes, I had no idea.
Yeah, the Atlanta drive is real.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about your upbringing.
Okay.
You come from a family of preachers.
Yes.
How did that shape you?
It shaped me. I'm a third generation AME preacher, but a fourth generation preacher. My great-grandfather was Baptist. My grandfather and father were bishops in the AME church. My dad was a part of the first class of those who were in the Peace Corps, drafted by Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor. My parents met at Boston University, where I was born. Was reared in Baltimore. I failed the 11th grade.
Well, unpack that a little bit.
Yes, I failed the 11th grade at the School for the Gifted and Talented.
Okay.
And got kicked out of that school, where my father and uncle were in the Hall of Fame. And so my parents put me on a journey of a rites of passage program so I could be the prodigal son and come to myself.
Wow.
So my last year of high school, after failing the 11th grade, they sent me to Liberia, West Africa, to be a missionary. And there was a real turning point in my life at that point. For those that don't know, Liberia was formed by former slaves. And at the time, they didn't have a public school system in Liberia. So you had people who were 19 in the 6th grade, people who were 21 who were in the 10th grade, not because they were held back, but because that's how old they were to have the money to go. So I became the topic of discussion in Liberia on how I failed school for free. That really gave me a readjustment on the value of education. I came out of doing that last year in Liberia and came to Morehouse as a part of the early college program, and really began to get my bearings. And Dean Crawford, who was Dean of Admissions at Morehouse at the end of that summer, said, are you going to be here for the fall? And I unpacked my story that I had to go do another year because I failed school. And Dean Crawford took me to the community college here in Atlanta, Fulton County, and got me a GED. So I was the first person Morehouse let in with a GED.
Wow.
And then I came back full circle after graduating from Morehouse and Duke. I was the youngest person since Dr. King that they let do the baccalaureate. So to be able to come full circle and now to be living in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
Is amazing. So that's my Cliff Notes.
How important was education in your journey? Because you're sitting here as a man
Yes.
who struggled academically in some areas.
Yes.
got a GED,
Yes.
and today you are a bona fide scholar.
Yes.
How did that education create room for you?
Jawanza Kunjufu wrote a book called To Be Popular or Smart. It says by the 6th grade, every black boy has got to decide whether they're going to be popular or smart. Wow. And I elected to be popular to my own deficiency. Every person in my immediate family has a doctorate degree, so they didn't even know how to minister to me because I was outside of that moment.
You didn't make sense to them.
I didn't make sense because my testing scores did not reflect my productivity. And again, I failed out of school for gifted and talented. And so it was always around me. I grew up around books and around scholars and around lectures, but that wasn't the cool thing to do. So I had to go through my own hard knock life to get my own sensibility.
When did it change for you? What was that moment?
I think I really did not become a student until I went to Duke for my master's degree at Morehouse. On paper, my major was political science, but in actuality, my major was Spelman. So I had to get myself together in order to really realize what I was supposed to be doing.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
That's what you got to love about this brother.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your activism.
Yes.
I remember I was the director for the Georgia Democratic Party and chief strategist for the Democratic Party. And I remember seeing you on CNN.
Yes.
And you were right next to another guy, and I think he was a black preacher too. But he was anti-black movement, he was anti-Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And they went to you for a response about him, not about the topic.
Yes.
And I said, well, that's kind of weird. How is he going to handle that? And you said, he's a pawn. Do you remember that?
I remember it.
Let me tell you why that was so iconic. I was a fan from that day forward.
Yes.
Because typically in arenas like that, there's pressure to not be that direct with your response. And you were. Tell me why you thought that moment needed that.
You're dealing with a millennial generation that is anti-church and anti-preachers. In the backdrop of the real preachers of whatever city you claim, that black millennials is the largest generation of black people on these shores who don't ascribe to organized faith and really have a bitter taste in their mouth about preachers and feel as if we're not engaged or connected. My church in Baltimore was built out of a hip hop generation and knew that that was necessary to separate myself. And then there's this whole false notion that all the black preachers from the 60s were with Dr. King. And so we've bleached history.
Yes.
And that's really not the case. The whole Baptist convention was split because they didn't want to align with them.
Right.
And so I really had to put a mark in the sand to say I'm not with them.
Right, and you did, and I
Yes.
think you did it very successfully. You took a church, you founded the AME church you pastored, and it was the fastest growing AME church on the planet.
Yes.
You started with, I think, 40-something members.
Yes.
You went up, what, 10,000 plus?
Yes.
Okay. What was the dynamic in your leadership which created that level of growth in the church when statistically the church was losing members?
I brought all of my frailties and flaws to ministry, where a lot of preachers use the pulpit for witness protection.
Say that again, both weakness,
protection. Yeah.
Wow.
So a lot of people get saved and then get amnesia.
About who they really are.
About who they are and
Yeah.
what they struggle with, and make salvation a destination and not a journey.
Come on now.
And so when you're really able to articulate that I'm saved and still deal with depression,
Right.
that I'm anointed and hate sleeping alone. And so when you deal with that level of authenticity, then it becomes more valuable and believable. The reality is that unscripted television has changed and impacted culture. As a consequence, nobody in America for a moment thought Trump was smarter than Hillary. They thought he was more believable. Because she was more believable, she got the vote, and that's beyond the politics and the red Magna hat and all of that. Is that there's still a great number of people who like him because of brazen ignorance. And so it's attractive because they think that that's more authentic and genuine, even if it's incompetent. And so people are looking for a legitimate ministry that says that I too struggle and still love God and still are trying to get to that place, and I think that people can identify with it better.
Leadership. I say to my students often that criticism is the price you pay for leadership.
Yes.
And the day you're unwilling to pay that price is the day you are unfit to lead anybody. I would say that you were the first major preacher to undergo sharp criticism through social media. Would I be far off in that statement?
No, you'd be close up on that statement.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to look at a couple of things. I started Empowerment Temple at 28 and became a national television preacher by 30, tele-evangelist by 31. So most of the people who would be my peers on that evangelical stage did not get to national prominence till they were 45 to 50. So they made all of their mistakes before the camera was rolling. So I was the gospel Gary Coleman. You know, I came through as a as a childhood person, and I made my mistakes publicly. And as a consequence, I had to live with that. The real reality about Dr. King is Dr. King was not the first civil rights leader. He was the first one in the dawn of television. And so I was the first one in the dawn of internet and bloggers, and had to take my stripes accordingly.
You acknowledged it. You acknowledged it, you embraced it, and you validated your humanity, even though you also uplifted your belief in Jesus. And what happened is that when you validated your humanity, other folks said, you know what, it's okay that I'm human and that I'm frail. We have a clip from our good friend, Roland Martin. You sat down and you spoke with him. This was back then. Right? And I thought he did one of the best interviews. Let's cue up the Roland Martin clip.
Thriving, growing church, and all of a sudden, those temptations meet you head on.
Well, I didn't have a litmus test. You have to understand, I was a national televangelist since I was 29, and the whole world had opened up for me. In every stage, I'm preaching in arenas, convention centers, mass mega churches, was quickly becoming a household name. So nothing in my mind ever said, one, I would ever get caught. Number two, that my wife would ever leave. Number three, that my church would tank out.
Walk us through. What happened?
I stepped Roland outside of my marriage and had a extramarital affair that ultimately ended in a divorce to an incredibly wonderful woman, not because anything was flawed in the marriage or in her, but in my own immaturity for the level that I was getting ready to go into. And when that happened, I think I was one of the first, if not the first, I don't want to take the honor, the first real black pastor to go through being castigated over the internet. My oldest daughter is 15. And I had to go to Atlanta, where it is that she lives, because a teacher said something sideways to her. And she was absolutely traumatized. If nothing else, this has been the most humbling process that you got to keep reliving it and explaining it and dealing with it and defending it. And nobody really understands that when you're in that public spotlight, you don't have the opportunity to process in private.
So there's so much in that, and you don't have to defend that. What made you realize that you could be that honest on national television and still have strength enough in your leadership to overcome and lead thousands?
I'm a church baby, and sometimes my mother told me years ago, sometimes you work under a bad boss so you learn what not to do. Sure. So those of us who grew up in the 80s, we remember Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker. So I knew that the crying game wasn't gonna work. No.
You went, so I want to say this. I did a lot of research, and I could not find, and I think this was to your credit.
Yes.
I could not find one instance where you spiritualized it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You never said it was spiritual warfare.
Yes.
You never said, come on now.
Yes.
You never said the devil made me do it.
Yes.
You never said the enemy was attacking my marriage.
Yes.
You didn't say any of that.
No.
Why?
It wasn't a Jezebel spirit. It was
it was just
it was a Jamal spirit. And you have to, Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true.
Yes.
And I think that that's really why a whole lot of people run out of church, is that people will not take accountability for their actions and try to use scripture as a force field. To say that it was somebody seduced you. No, nobody seduced you if you were the one that pursued it.
Yeah. Wow. We got to talk about transition.
Yes.
What was the day like when the church you founded realized that you were leaving? What was that day like?
It was like Cleveland burning LeBron's jersey.
Yeah.
It was nobody expects you to leave what you started.
Right. As a leader, why did you make that decision?
John Eldridge wrote a book called Man at Heart. It says that every man has got to have a battle to fight, a war to win, and a woman to love. And I really felt that I had peaked in Baltimore. I had done, Negro spiritual, I done what he told me to do. When I started the church, Baltimore had a population of 1.2 million. Last year when I stepped down, the population was at 685,000.
Wow.
And so there wasn't much room to grow. So now when you meet people in Atlanta, you have to ask them, where are you from?
Yeah.
When you meet people in Baltimore, you ask them, what high school did you go to?
Right.
Because everybody is there.
Yeah.
And I really felt unchallenged and had hit a brick wall. So the last 2 years I had been floundering and frustrated. I'd done 3 services, had an elementary charter school, first in the state, highest test scores for any students in a charter school in Baltimore, had a family life center. I'd helped quell the uprising in Baltimore after Freddie Gray.
Right. And you had a tremendous political following as well.
Yeah, had
people wanted you to run for stuff.
Absolutely. And it really was knocking me down. Soren Kierkegaard said that the greatest gateway to sin is not temptation, it's boredom. That a whole lot of our sin is not because we want it, but because we ain't got nothing to do.
Come on.
And so I was feeling boredom hit me and knew that I was getting ready to go into a rabbit's hole.
Let me read a quote from a mutual friend, Tommy Deutsch.
Yes.
Tommy was the first one for us who confirmed you would be here in Atlanta. And he gave a quote, and I think he actually gave the quote to the AJC, and it says, I've known Jamal for years, dating all the way back to his NAACP days, and I've watched him grow his church from about 45 congregants to thousands of people, and I believe he'll make a wonderful fit. He was talking about New Birth. Did New Birth come after you? Did you come after New Birth? How did that interaction happen?
It was a marriage made in heaven.
Okay.
Really. I don't think either of us was looking for either one of us.
And that's what it seemed. It seemed as if
yes.
you weren't looking and they weren't really looking.
They weren't looking for me. They were looking.
They were looking out for
Yes,
you, though, right?
Yeah. So it was an accidental meeting, as it were. Bishop Ellis, who's one of my mentors and serves as one of the advisors to New Birth, asked me to just go in and fill in a Sunday.
Okay.
So that he was supplying the pulpit.
Right.
So I said, no, I don't preach out on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I can do a midweek, but
Okay.
I don't.
You're at home on Sundays.
I'm home on Sundays.
Yeah.
So so he pulled my coattail and said, you owe me a salad. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go to fifth Sunday in August. Nobody comes to church. Negroes are at the family reunion
Right.
and parents are taking their kids back to college. It's an off Sunday. So I go and preach. It's youth day. It's raining. Hardly nobody is there. And I preach. And I call Bishop Ellis after service from the office.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, Bishop. So he said, don't think about it. They only looking for somebody married. So I said, okay.
So you had an inclination in that moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an inclination in that moment.
But see, you saw challenge, right?
I don't know what I saw, but it had to be a move of God.
They made a great decision. You've been packing the building out. I've heard reports that Sundays, 100, 200 folks are joining every Sunday. Y'all got to give that a round of applause. That's growth in the kingdom. That's growth in the kingdom. What do you attribute that to, that kind of growth?
The grace of God.
Amen.
It's amazing because we don't have a PR staff.
Yeah.
We don't have any billboards. We don't have any radio advertisements. Just the grace of God is doing it. I really had in my mind that it was going to take us about 2 years to turn the ship. And
it happened immediate.
Yeah, I've been there since December 9th, and in 60 days, 1,000 people have joined.
Wow.
So it is really just, it's amazing.
Them bringing you on board created a tremendous amount of earned media.
Yes.
We talked about you on WAOK and V103. CBS 46 did some great stuff. The AJC had an article said 9 things you need to know about Jamal Bryant, and they were all positive, by the way.
They were all positive.
Right?
I was holding my breath. I don't even have asthma, but I bought a pump just in case.
So you got all of this tremendous earned media and all of this great love. Did you expect that?
No.
Wow.
No. The AJC is BIG notorious.
Yeah.
So I was holding my breath.
They did you righteous.
They did me gracious.
Yeah.
And that was me another sign that God was with me.
We have just a few minutes. I got to have Pastor Bryant out because he needs to be back in the Lithonia area right at 7, fighting the traffic.
Yes.
So I want to open it up to Q&A. Before I open it up to Q&A, let me ask you a couple of questions I always end with.
Yes.
Your hero.
Yes. Is my grandfather, who I'm named for, Harrison Bryant. He's was born out of Georgetown, South Carolina, and went back to the 6th grade at 21 years of age.
Wow.
And then after pulling himself up by proverbial his own bootstraps, went to Wilberforce University in Ohio and became the first one in our family to get a doctorate degree from Payne Seminary right across from Oberlin, and became a bishop in the AME Church. And his grace and strength is really amazing to me. He died my freshman year at Morehouse. Wow. And so I'm still enamored by his looming greatness.
You did something that was quite remarkable that caused many other ministers to follow. You took a stand for Bennett College.
Yes.
They were at risk of losing accreditation. They needed to raise just a few $1 million.
Yes.
Really not a lot when you look at endowments of other colleges.
Yes.
You took a hard stand. You made a major contribution. You talked about it from the pulpit. You advocated about it on social media. Other preachers followed. They raised the money. They still lost the accreditation, but a federal judge in Atlanta gave it back to them temporarily.
Yes.
I have maintained that if it wasn't for you, I don't think they would have reached that goal, brother.
Yes.
What made you take that kind of stand for a college you did not go to,
Right.
but you knew was important to save?
Well, number one, Bennett is actually Morehouse's sister school. And as I testified on this stage, that it was an HBCU that saved my life.
Yeah.
And gave me that opportunity. Now, that's in the backdrop of me having two parents with doctorate degrees. So say I didn't have that kind of support,
Right.
that I was from Bankhead, and say that I didn't interface with a dean that saw my potential, say I didn't have the presence of an educated father and grandfather, I don't know if I'd be sitting on this stage.
That's right.
So that they made that level of investment, I think I have a responsibility to pay it forward.
Amen. Biggest regret?
I got a lot of them. Yeah, I die daily.
We don't have time, brother.
No, this getting ready to be Throwback Thursdays, but I have a lot of regrets. I regret that in my rearing, preparing for ministry, that I never prepared me. So I learned how to argue a text and exegete and how to orate, but never did self-development.
Wow.
And so I had to do self-development on a stage. And so I regret that I wasn't preparing
Right.
for what God had already showed me.
You hit on a dynamic I tell my students, and many of them are in the room today. And I say you got to be very careful about your charisma taking you to places where your character cannot sustain you.
Yes.
And we've all been there. I've been there. Where you depend on education, charisma, connection, your ability, your talent, and you get to a place where your character just is not sustaining you at that level.
Right.
Because you focused on developing these external factors and never developing yourself internally. It's a great lesson to learn. Let's take a couple of questions. We got to be quick with the questions. Brother, quickly, yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Pleasure, Dr. Bryant. First of all, I've always great respect for you, particularly starting in 2015, building up to the 20th anniversary of the man Mark, because you weren't afraid to stand with Minister Farrakhan.
Yes, sir.
And I have to respect that. Most people are afraid, but I want you to discuss, around about a few weeks ago with the challenge in reference to the open letter, you talked about the challenge for the black church.
Yes.
Could you discuss some of that with the speeds on the challenge you put forth to the black church?
Yes.
And then secondly, dealing with the boycott. Around in the 1950s, 1960s, they had an Easter boycott, and that's something they don't want to talk about. I know we talked about the boycott last night. As a possibility to move forward. Easter is coming up, and we spend billions of dollars as a way of moving forward to fight for justice.
Thank you. You didn't tell me your name.
My name is Brother Wendell Muhammad.
All right, brother.
Oh, Brother Muhammad, let's do the show, brother. I know who you are.
Thank you.
Yes.
I did a interview for Princeton University Seminary, and they did it from New Birth and Skyped it back to Princeton.
Okay.
And the professor that came wanted to know how I was having a relationship with Minister Farrakhan, and in good faith, holding on to my Christian morals and values. That's a whole nother question, but I'm
Right.
giving context to
Right.
dear brother's question. And in it, I really talked about the failure of the black church in relationship to black men. That the mosque is 80% men, and the church is 80% women.
Come on.
And that the success of the Nation of Islam in large measure is a direct picture of the failure of the black church. Is that their national leaders, without exception, have come out of the black church. You take as a sterling example Malcolm X, the son of a Baptist preacher.
Right.
His father was killed in front of him, and he spiraled into a life of crime, ended up in jail, was converted by the Nation of Islam. And I raised the pointed question, when his father died, where were the deacons? When his father died, who from the church surrounded him to give him what it is that he needed? Furthermore, the Nation of Islam has beat us upside of the head from following the biblical mandate that somehow we've run derelict to in terms of remembering the prisoners. And so most of our churches don't have an active prison ministry. That we love Paul but don't know what to do with Saul.
Come on.
And so the open letter of challenge that came forth is I made a statement that was that needed to be clarified in reference to Minister Farrakhan, that many of the churches that I am in relationship with and grew up under my pastor, Bishop Frank Reed, who's a liberation theologian, brought Minister Farrakhan many years. One of my surrogate mentors, Dr. Willie Wilson, has brought Minister Farrakhan for many years. And my argument was that not too many preachers preach in the mosque because we don't, in many ways, preach an authentic gospel that will bring our men back.
Wow.
And that if we were able to do that, then it would shift some things. Sure. But our prophetic voice has caught laryngitis. Is that men in the community, when they think of a real spiritual man, they don't think of a Christian, they think of a Muslim.
Wow.
And what does that mean to our fabric and our fiber? That to think of a strong man of faith and community orientation, you immediately think of a Muslim man. But when you think of a Christian man, you either think of an old man or a feminine man.
Come on. Yeah.
And so how do we bridge that gap in terms of moving forward? Your second question, the Easter.
The boycott.
The Easter boycott. I think I've challenged our church, New Birth, that on Easter Sunday, that we're going to wear T-shirts and jeans. That Resurrection Sunday shouldn't be about fashion, it should be about faith. And so I have our church in a 40-day fast from all materialism and consumption. In that in those 40 days, I'm speaking death over check cashing places in the black community. That we've got to open up savings accounts, because in a checking account, the bank doesn't take you seriously, of building portfolios. The dean of admissions at Morehouse said to me that our student loan office is filled not because we have a economic crisis, but because we have a planning crisis. So parents know for 18 years you should be grooming this child for higher education. And so while you don't have any money to spend in the school, but you've bought them flat screens televisions and iPhone 10s and $200 tennis shoes, so that this generation has the benefit of the civil rights movement but never know the sacrifice of it.
Wow.
And so we've got to rechannel how it is that we do our thinking. So to deal with the boycott, I think that is good, but I think that it really has to go larger than that in how it is that we look at consumption. I was with T.I. last night having a conversation about Gucci and this boycott. And my contention is that if we boycott Gucci, what will that do for black designers? And part of the problem is our black designers that are replete throughout the city of Atlanta can't have business, not because their products are not well, but because we want a nickel and dime them.
Yeah.
So we'll pay $500 for a Gucci belt, but won't pay $200 for an African skirt. So I think at some point we got to argue on what is our value.
And he's speaking from a place of authenticity, because him and I have the same suit shop, same tailor, and it's all black owned, straight from the motherland, black owned. We ran into each other by happenstance at the suit shop. Yeah.
For the record, he was buying more than me. And my bags got lost.
Just that day, brother. Just that day.
Yeah, go ahead.
We got time for one more. I want to get a woman to, yes, I'm equal opportunity.
First of all, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I gotta say honestly, my friend Earl here told me you were gonna be here, and my initial reaction was, no, thank you, because I was at New Birth a long time ago.
Yes.
But I want to commend you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you, similar to what he asked. My dad was a Muslim.
Yes.
I grew up Muslim. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a businesswoman because of how my dad brought us up. But I had a praying grandma that took me to church, and that's where home was. What do you say to the millennials and the young people that have had similar experiences where they can step back away from the church and go, wait a minute, this man right here, God touched this man in prison.
Yes.
God touched my dad in prison. The man that helped my family was a Jew.
Yes.
My grandma was a Christian. What do you say to the millennial to explain that God is bigger than these packages that we put in so that you can get them to come back? Because I think part of the problem is that they, with the internet and with being connected globally,
Yes.
they can see bigger than what we're teaching. How are you going to address that?
All right.
Because I hear a lot of millennials say, yeah, God is not in this little box. I like church,
Yes.
but what they're saying God is, I understand God to be bigger.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, sister. You got 3 minutes to answer because I promised your people I would have you back in Lithonia by 7. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
First, thank you for overriding your emotion and coming. I appreciate it. Gandhi said that that love doesn't have a religion. And I think that part of the failure of the church is that we have built God around rules and not relationship. And I often use the example about 2 years ago when I was pastoring in Baltimore. We had the funeral for one of the biggest drug dealers in my city. And my church smelled like we were in Kingston. And I'm preparing, some of y'all will get that later. I was preparing to give the eulogy. The church is packed and jammed. It looked like Easter. And there was an altercation at my back door, and I didn't know what it was. So I got out of the pulpit, went to the back door to see what the commotion was. And my dutiful ushers were trying to turn young men away because they wouldn't take their hats off. And I had to jump in and say, this may be the only time I can get them to church.
That's right.
And so I'm not going to lose this sole opportunity because they got hats on. And it was really a lot of things that we claim are religious are really cultural.
Come on. Yeah.
So God doesn't have any rules about you can't be on the praise team because you got a tattoo on your neck. And so we got to begin to separate some stuff just to get to the heart. When you love somebody at capacity, they'll be able to check themselves. So if you and I go to court tomorrow downtown Atlanta, and a young man is going to be standing before the judge pleading for his life with his pants hanging down his behind, with a white T-shirt on. But for him, it's clean. And that's what he has. And he doesn't have a father that taught him to tie a tie. You got to love people in the righteousness. If you and I are in relationship, you don't have to give rules. Because you and I are in relationship, you don't need to tell me to be home by 1. I'm going to be home because I love you, not because you gave me a rule. Yeah, you understand?
Right.
And I think that we've got to learn how to foster relationship, and the relationship will then bespeak the rules.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pastor Jamal Bryant.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I know you were blessed. It's making me go back in time just looking at it, but I'm going into the future believing it. I want you to partner with me. You already know by now I'm in the middle of a series, The Top 10. I want you to sow a seed that is reflective of what you are expecting God to do. And the only thing I ask is you do it in denominations of 10. If you can't give 10, give 50. Can't give 50, give 100. Can't give 100, give 1,000. If you can't give 1,000, if you give 1 million, I'll be your best friend. but I'm believing by faith that God's going to do something. So right now, all the prompts are available on the screen. And do me a favor, don't forget to tune in tomorrow, this exact same time, because we going way back.
That's right. New Birth, it's time to testify. Tell us how your obedience and trusting in God's word in the area of your tithes and offerings turned a page in your life. If you have a testimony, text NB Top 10 to 71441 right now. And make sure to mark your calendars for Demonstration Sunday, taking place on our virtual platform on September 13, 2020. We are encouraging all members and frequent visitors to collectively tithe that day and others to commit to start tithing. Let's begin tithing together and watch God take care of the rest. This is a public service announcement. We are calling all retirees, seniors, single parents, entrepreneurs, students ages 17 to 25, educators, furloughed workers, married couples, first responders, creatives, those in technology, and committed visitors. Join Dr. Jamal Bryant for a very special Zoom and prayer call. You don't want to miss this brief moment of instruction and impartation from Pastor Bryant. Make sure you sign up by texting NB Top 10 to 71441 and complete the ministry form. New Birth, this is Sabbatical. Time to rest, refresh, and refocus. Join us again today at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for another Sabbatical Rewind.